Hi, everybody. Welcome to this podcast where we desire for you to be healed, whole in body, in soul, and in your spirit. Today, I want to talk about the topic bitterness. Bitterness is like a root, and I want to discuss this root because oftentimes when you think about a root, it's something you can't see. It's something that is underneath. It's a root. It's underground and it goes undetected. But it's important to give ourselves an assessment, a self-evaluation, self-assessment, so that we can see what's really growing in the soil of our hearts and what this root really does to us. It destroys us. It defiles us. And it grows little by little. Bitterness does not grow overnight. It grows little by little, until it becomes this huge, ugly growth that begins to defile our entire lives. Bitterness usually starts speaking up, and it starts to peek up out of the depths of our soul. And it starts in the form of negative thoughts, perhaps about other people, thoughts about a person, and those thoughts are sour, they're sharp, they're distrusting, they're cynical. Their cynical attitude towards someone that perhaps has offended you or hurt you. And if the root is not quickly uprooted and removed, that bitterness doesn't go away. It will eventually become like a tree that produces more bitterness, that begins to wound and hurt others, and it begins to produce even fruit. So hurting people begin to hurt other people. How do I know that I have bitterness? How can we detect if we have bitterness or if any bitterness is growing up inside of us? We can ask the question, am I bitter? Well, here's some symptoms that I'd like to leave with you today so that you can kind of do a self-assessment and check in within yourself to see if there's any bitterness that has been growing inside of your soul. How do I know that I'm bitter? Well, the first point I'd like to make is we start to replay things in our minds. Do you find yourself replaying things in your mind? Constantly replaying the tapes of a conversation with somebody or rehashing certain words? Bitterness will always grow in the soil of justification when you find yourself playing the tape over and over again. And that's a huge sign that a bitter root is springing up, where you can't seem to shake off this rewind, if you will, replay of going back to this certain situation. And it usually grows in a justification. We don't take responsibility and we start to justify as to why we're doing it. The other point I'd like to address to detect if there's any bitterness in our heart is there a particular person or a particular group of people that you find yourself constantly speaking badly about? Maybe the question we should ask is, why do you feel the need to speak so derogatory about a particular group or about a particular person? What does this reveal about the condition of your own heart? Has God maybe been trying to deal with you about your attitude towards a person or group of people? And it's important for us to really be honest with ourselves. Honesty is one of the best gifts that you can give yourself. And it takes a lot of honesty and humility to admit that there's bitterness or that there's something in the heart that's affecting you. Because one thing that bitterness comes to do, it comes to affect the level of joy. Sometimes it's difficult to be full of joy and happiness because of bitterness. Bitterness eats away our joy. And how does it do that? It does it on the inside with negative thoughts about other people. If maybe we have these thoughts, hassling thoughts, what do we do about them? It's important for us to address them and to be honest with ourselves. Another way to indicate or to really identify bitterness is what we're saying, what we're speaking, what comes out of our mouths, what we're posting. Is our mouth out of control? It's important that we look at what we're talking about. What kinds of words come out of your mouth? Is it critical words? Is it rude words, cursing words, murmuring words, degrading somebody or some group? Is there defamation of character? Is there slander? Is there gossip about somebody or some particular group? Those are all signs of bitterness. Another way to detect bitterness is to ask the question, am I sick? There was a psychologist by the name of Dr. Karsten Rosch, and he studied bitterness for about 15 years. And one thing that he says, quote, when harbored for a long time, bitterness may forecast patterns of biological dysregulation, a physiological impairment that can affect your metabolism, your immune response, even organ function, and it can cause physical diseases. Do you know that scientists have found that when bitterness has gone undetected, it will always affect a hormonal system, immune system? Anybody that carries bitterness will begin to have eventually high blood pressure. They'll begin to have heart diseases. Another way to indicate and to identify bitterness is look at your friends. Are your friends and those that you are quote unquote friends with, are they bitter? If your friends are bitter, you are probably carrying some form of bitterness yourself. You know, one of the things that you look at when you think about a gardener, every good gardener knows that you just can't chop away weeds. I don't know if you've ever seen a gardener, and they're not very good gardeners because they'll take their weed whacker and they just kind of whack the weeds on top. But we know that when you do that, the roots can eventually spring up again at some point. So what we have to do with roots is we've got to yank them up from the root. Otherwise, they're going to keep springing up from time to time, from season to season. And this is where we see people, they repeat seasons. I heard a quote, and the quote went like this: forgiveness is not an occasional act, but it is a constant attitude. Our attitude should constantly be that of, I've got to check within. Do I have this unforgiveness? You know, sometimes we think we're really over something. Have you ever said to yourself, I think we're all guilty of it. Oh, I'm over it. And you pretend that everything's okay, but something inside of you is just not quite right. You're having trouble sleeping. You can't stop thinking about what happened to you. You can't seem to move on. We have a hard time forgiving people, and sometimes some more than others. And the reason why is perhaps there's something that's unreconciled inside of your heart. And so we may not want to admit it, but sometimes what's harboring in our hearts is bitterness. So you can detect this bitterness also by asking the question, do you struggle and you constantly maybe experience anger and you're bottling up this anger inside? Do you bottle up this anger? Is there maybe bitterness towards a particular person, a family member, friends, people that walked out on you, a spouse, a child? It's important to check within because bitterness is something that really defiles us. It's something that pollutes us. It robs us of life. Another way to detect if there's bitterness is you find yourself experiencing continual anger, but also pettiness and impulsiveness. You know, when you interact with somebody that maybe is struggling with bitterness, you kind of maybe won't be petty and you're petty about things. These passive aggressive behaviors, right? You might passively aggressively send text messages. You maybe get upset about certain things and you get upset very easily. You're petty about things. Ask yourself this question and be honest with yourself. Am I bitter? Or maybe you're just desperate to make people understand how you feel. That inner monologue, what does it sound like? If the person who caused me pain could only see what they've done, they would want to say that they were sorry. We are so desperate to make people understand how we feel. So we post things because everybody has to know how I feel. Those are all signs of bitterness. It's your inner monologue. It's like everybody needs to know, because this person who caused me pain needs to see what they've done. They've got to pay for what they've done, and if they see it, then they're going to turn around and they're going to say they're sorry. Those are all signs of bitterness. Here's another one. Do memories haunt you? And you have this memory that maybe just keeps haunting you. You can't seem to get past it. And you're maybe replaying it in your mind, and it leads you to maybe bitter thoughts. You could be compulsive. You maybe are an impulsive person. You have negative spiral compulsive activities that maybe end up happening in your life. You have unnecessary purchases. You have to eat a lot. You have these behaviors, right, that are trying to express, right, but they're out of control, these behaviors. And, the way you maybe overspend, or you're trying to distract yourself, right, from getting to the heart of the matter, and you would rather just evade and avoid it and distract yourself. Some people get very busy. Some people say we can't have any downtime, because if I have downtime, then I'm going to have to think about, and I'm going to have to get quiet, and quietness and being by myself and really facing myself is not pretty. So we can become compulsive. We start to get distracted by being very, very busy. Those are all signs. Or here's another one. You're not taking responsibility for your feelings. You find yourself maybe putting the blame on other people, and you can't really take responsibility for your own feelings. You can't control what other people do, but you have to take responsibility for the feelings that you're feeling. And so maybe you're blaming everybody, and you're blaming your offenders. You're blaming the cat, the dog. You're blaming the weather. You blame everybody. But those are signs that you're not taking responsibility for your own feelings. Here's a quote. I hold you responsible, not just for what you did to me, but how I reacted and responded to what you did. I hold you responsible for my unhappiness. Now, doesn't that sound ridiculous? Let me repeat it. I hold you responsible. Let's say somebody offended you, hurt you, and they've done you wrong. And you say back to them, I hold you responsible, not just for what you did to me, but I'm going to hold you responsible. How I reacted and how I responded to what you did. I hold you responsible for my own unhappiness. That's ridiculous, right? You can't hold somebody responsible for your own unhappiness. You can't hold somebody responsible for how you react or how you respond to whatever it is that they did to you. Another sign is you feel sick. Something's not right. Maybe you're harboring that bitterness, and your body is trying to tell you something. Maybe you're struggling with stress, anxiety, depression, high blood pressure, pain in your body, and the body is trying to tell you something. Here's another one. Maybe you're trying to keep score, right? It's like you're keeping score, and you're going, they did another one, and this is what they did, and you're just kind of keeping score, and it's now affecting you. Maybe you don't like who you are, or you carry guilt, or there's self-judgment and shame. Those two are signs of bitterness. Replaying it over and over. Now you're gossiping about people, or maybe you feel entitled. People who feel entitled feel that everything they did was right, while what they did was maybe completely wrong. But you think in your mind, I feel entitled. Everything I did was right, while what you did was completely wrong. So it's important to examine, remarks like that, because that's a belief, and that belief is going to lead you to a behavior. People who are entitled believe that the one that offended them was all at fault, and what they did was all completely right. What you did was completely wrong. Now, we've all failed from time to time. There is not a person that has not failed. And an entitled person will make remarks, will make statements, will post things, and it sounds entitled. It sounds, you did everything wrong and I did everything right. But that's a sign that you need some healing and there's bitterness that's harbored in your heart. You really don't perceive well. You can't see well. Your view is completely distorted. And if you really got honest with yourself and took responsibility, you would realize one thing, that you didn't all do it correctly, that there were some things that you also missed. You missed the mark yourself. And somebody who maybe takes responsibility, that doesn't want to harbor that bitterness in their heart, doesn't necessarily feel entitled. But entitlement sounds like that. You did it all wrong and I did it all right. You know how you know you have harbored bitterness is the heart is just cold. You just can't trust people anymore. You can't share your feelings because you're afraid. And that root of bitterness really comes to defile. It really comes to destroy you. It takes your life away and it's robbing you of so many beautiful things that life can bring you. So I just want to encourage you in this podcast. Take a moment. Think about what areas in your life could possibly allow for a root of bitterness to begin to grow. And don't allow it. Kind of think about, check in within yourself, inside of your emotions, inside of your soul, inside of your thought life, and ask yourself, do I have any of these symptoms? Because bitterness is robbing me. It's robbing me of my life. It's robbing me of joy. And I don't want to live this life without joy. It's robbing me of my health, of my relationships, of my future, and all the beautiful things that life wants to bring you. So I want to challenge you today. Go and start pulling the root of bitterness out. Yank it out like a wise farmer would.